A pleasant good evening to everyone. Welcome to another Sunday evening's webinar. It's my pleasure to welcome each and every one of you and to thank you for making the time to be here. And it's always a pleasure for me to do this. It's part of what gives, meaning to my life. I really do enjoy it. And I believe what we're going to talk about this evening is going to be very helpful, very useful, very empowering for you. I want to ask that you listen intently, listen carefully, take notes if you like, take screenshots if you like. But the information it could be very much life changing for us, as it has been for me. And to lead it off, I want to just share something that happened this week in a discourse I had with a colleague of mine. He was sharing with me some difficulties that he's going through. And when he was finished sharing some of the challenges, he breathed very deeply and said, I wish I could breathe easier. And he wasn't referring to needing more oxygen. He was referring to the load that he's carrying through life and the weight of all the challenges that he's dealing with. And he was talking about how he's trying to keep his family together, juggling the bills, and trying to maintain his health, which he felt was slipping away from him. And I asked him, I said, if it were up to you, entirely up to you, to change the picture, to change what you're going through in the course of your life, what would that look like? And he said to me, I would want to know what it is like to be free from having to worry about the bills, worrying about finances, worrying about the children, worrying about tomorrow. He said, I would want to know what it is to live a free and fulfilling life. And he said, I would want to know that there's actually hope for a brighter tomorrow. And I asked him, do you think that this is possible for you? And he said to me, I don't know. I want to put that very question to you this evening. We're all, what he shared with me is what many people are going through in our own way. We're all going through our own struggles to some degree. And we're wondering if there is hope and we are looking for solutions for whatever. And I put the question to you, if it were up to you, what would that difference be? What would it look like? And I'm going to say to you what I said to him, which is, it really is up to you. It really is in your hands. It's in my hands. It's in our hands. It really is up to us to change the picture. It's not up to circumstances changing. It's not up to the government changing. It really is up to us. And I hope to be able to show us tonight, to give us a glimpse of that, because we don't have a lot of time to go into depth with a lot of things, but to give us a glimpse of how that really is possible. And so I'm going to share my screen with you now, and what we're going to be talking about will go along those lines. The format that we're going to take will cover two segments, and it will be here for about an hour. And part of it is uh, a conceptual understanding of health and well-being, which I call sovereign well-being. And it really is understanding the seamless flow of life from spirit through soul and body. And it's about wholeness. It's about our life as a whole, every dimension of our life. And so we're going to be talking, I'm going to be sharing some principles from that concept and understanding how we can live a much better life in whatever area it might be that we may be struggling or have a challenge with in every area of our life. I'm also going to talk about a simple pattern that's reshaping the future of mind body wellness. Why? Because it is really the most profound discovery in supporting what optimum well being is. And I define well being as that seamless flow of life through our whole being, spirit, mind, and body. And this simple pattern, it taps into the very nature of our being in a way that, unlike anything that I have come across in my 25 years of clinical practice, from which I'm retired now from clinical practice, but in my 25 years, I have worked with all different types of modalities and products and nutraceuticals and herbals and homeopathics. But I've never come across anything quite like this that goes to the depths, that has this profound impact on human well being. And because it's relevant to what we're going to be talking about, I'm going to share this with you. I have incorporated it in my life personally, and it has made a tremendous difference. Myself, my wife, family members, and the people that I work with, I share this with them. And so it has become a natural part of my Sovereign Health program and what we do. And so our topic is Restore Your Health, Awaken Your Life. And it's not just a topic, it really is a formula. That if we can restore our health, we will indeed awaken our lives. And when I say awaken our lives, I'm talking about awaken in the sense of living more intentionally, living more consciously aware, living in a way that we have sovereignty, where we have rule over our lives, where we no longer go through life just as the wind blows. We determine and we actually can create our reality. But to awaken our lives in that manner, we really must restore our health. And to restore our health, we need to have a broader, wider, and a deeper understanding and perspective on what health really is. We have been taught to think about health in the context of our physical well being. And while it may include that, that's just partial. But health is really a state of complete physical, mental, spiritual, and social well being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And it's important that we look at this very carefully and understand it. And we're going to pick this apart, unpack this a little bit, so that we can be able to appropriate it into how we can engage it in practical terms in our life. And it's important to recognize that it is not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And why that is important is because we have been taught to think that if we don't feel sick and there are no symptoms in our bodies, it's equivalent to being healthy. And that is very far from true. As a result, all approaches out there usually just deal with symptoms, and whether that symptom may be a physical symptom or ailment in our bodies, whether it may be a mental, spiritual, social, or relational, we generally have the same mode of approach whereby we are dealing with what is facing us, what is troubling us, or the symptoms, if you will. And it's more than that. And we're going to understand that further. But it's not what it's not, it must be what is present. And it is a state of being that is complete. Health is a complete state of being that encompasses everything to do with our physical well being, our mental and emotional well being, our spiritual well being, and how that as a whole interfaces with the social framework of our lives. Because we live in a world where we are interacting with people every day of life, from in our households to in our work to in our day to day living. And how we as a being interface and interact with other human beings is really a remedy and a formula in and of itself of how we can live a healthy life. But we must have the correct perspective. And so this evening, we're talking about restoring our whole life because the state of being that's relative to health encompasses every aspect of life. Nothing is separated from health. So I want us to really, as we think about health, we must think about it in the context of our whole life, every dimension of our lives, every aspect of living, every level of well being is encompassed in this concept we call health. And so no longer is it just about how our body feels and functions, but it's about the quality of our lives and how we are experiencing that quality of life. And so we're going to break this down because when it comes to the quality of life, just like the story I just related, it is the story of the majority of the global population. You see, life was never meant to be an uphill struggle, but statistics from authorities, and you can do your own due diligence and research, that 80% of the global human population is suffering from three major areas of our lives. There are three categories that encompasses pretty much every aspect of the struggles that we go through. The primary of which is health and wellness. And the World Health Organization has statistics on their website that tells us how things are expected to get worse in the coming decade. That the percentages of chronic lifestyle diseases are escalating, mental dysfunction, cognitive illnesses. There's this increase, and they're not just the percentages are getting more, but the ages are getting younger. The cost of healthcare is going up. And there are more deaths caused by chronic lifestyle disease than any other form of death on the planet, more than wars and violence combined. It's a global pandemic, and not much, we go about life without much thought about it, and it deserves as much attention in our lives as the COVID pandemic was, because it's far greater than that. Relationship issues are another major area, and these are all interconnected. None of them are separate. They're all interconnected areas. But the relationship issues that we are facing today, the statistics are there. You can go through them, you can look at them. And the other one is economics, our financial struggles in life. In fact, our financial struggles in life, based on the statistics, almost exactly mirror the statistics about health and wellness or sickness and disease. The rates and the increasing rates of sickness and disease as it relates to financial struggles and living in debt and all that goes along with it, they almost mirror each other. And so I want us to first be aware that all struggles in life, it doesn't matter which category it comes from because they're all interconnected. They're all expressions arising out of the same state of being. Health is about our life, and health is about a state of being. And that state of being is one of completeness or wholeness or an integration of every dimension of our lives in balance and in harmony. And so this state of being is going to be our point of focus because our struggles in life, which we all want to live our best life. And while we may be trying to fix the issues of health, or we may be trying to fix the issues of relationships, or we may be trying to fix the issues of financial struggles, we need to know that they are not separate issues. They are separate, they're individual expressions or different expressions of one fundamental issue, which is our state of being. And if we can get that right, which is why I said in the beginning, whatever our struggles may be, it really is up to us to be able to change the picture from where we are and what we desire, and know that we have everything within us to be able to create the reality that we so desire. So let's begin to unpack this, looking at the dimensions of what we call health. We are three-dimensional beings, and pretty much we all accept that. But we need to have a little bit of an understanding of how this works so we can put it together. Otherwise, we will continue to, whether it is a symptom in our body, we're going to look for something external, a pill, some remedy for that. If it is a mental issue, we are going to do the same. If it is relational, we are going to do the same. We tend to have these quick fix it approaches to whatever it is we're dealing with, as opposed to transformation, whereby the problem no longer exists, or restoration, whereby the problem no longer exists. And so, understanding that we are three-dimensional beings, and we're not going to get deep into this, but what I want to focus on is the mind of it. Spirit, mind, and body. Why? Because mind is what negotiates the orientation between our states of being, and it determines how we experience life. However we are experiencing life, whether it is peaceful or miserable, whether it is struggling or prosperous, whatever it may be, it is being determined by our state of being. And that will become clearer. And so our life, what we are experiencing that we call life, our very living experience, life emits, and it comes from our essence of being, which is spiritual. That's a deeper conversation. But mind is what processes all that emits from our source of life, which is spirit. It processes it into awareness, and that awareness interprets thoughts, emotions, beliefs into experience through our central nervous system. And the body reflects that inner state according to how the mind is oriented. Our mind is going to be oriented only one of two ways, either internally by our true nature of being, which is spiritual, or it will be oriented externally by our physical senses. And that is why I'm saying that it is up to us to determine our state of being, because it will only be oriented one of two ways. Now, we always hear it said that as a man thinketh, or that our thoughts contribute to creating our reality. The experts say to us that we have about 60 or 70,000 thoughts a day, and about 80 or 90% of them are habitual thoughts that we've been thinking all the time. Only about 10% are new thoughts that we have, but we have a habitual way of thinking. And so what we need to be aware of, and I'm going to just take us through the steps, hopefully that we can catch it, that our thoughts arises as the mind interprets either signals from our spiritual nature that comes through intuition, or from our physical senses, which is the external reality. And the quality of our thoughts depends on which source, either internal, which is subconscious resonance from spirit, or external from memory, conditioning, experience, etc. But our thoughts will naturally arise. But and most of these thoughts that are arising, we are not consciously thinking them. Only 5% of our thoughts and our thinking is conscious. When we are trying to analyze or rationalize things, 5%, 95% of our thoughts are arising unconsciously. They are just happening. We're not thinking, thoughts are happening. And it's coming from one of two sources, or it can even be from both sources. The point is this is how it works. Our thoughts are filtered through perception, how we perceive reality, which is shaped by our mindsets, which is based on identity, beliefs, values, cultural condition, and our expectations. Why is this important? Because our perception is what interprets our thoughts into experience as emotions. In other words, the signature of experience are emotions. There is no experience that we can have that does not have an emotion attached to it. Every experience is signed off by an emotion. Emotions are the signature expression of experience. So we don't just have an experience of life. Our mind is through our mindsets, our perception is interpreting our thoughts into an experience which is signatured as an emotion. So two people going through the same experience, one person feels worried and anxious about it, and the other person feels very peaceful and happy about it. Same experience. And the difference is how they interpreted the experience, what they thought about it, and how those thoughts were interpreted based on their mindsets. And their mindsets were shaped by their sense of identity, beliefs, values, cultural conditioning, and expectations. So again, it goes back to we are the ones that determine our state of being based on which side of life we decide to ground our thinking in, to ground our sense of identity in. Either our true essence of being, which is spiritual, that's another conversation, or how we've been conditioned to perceive ourself and our identity as a physical being governed by our senses. And the thing is, that's normal to us because we have not really been taught the other way. Now, emotions are the energies that stir within us by the meaning we assign to the events that we go through in life. Someone may say something to us, do something to us, or some circumstance arises in our life. What we think and the meaning we assign to that, in other words, how we interpreted that event based on our mindsets, is what's going to determine the experience of it. That experience is going to determine the quality of our life. Emotions, and this is going to be important because when it comes, whether it is sickness and disease in our bodies, relationship issues, and financial problems, it all comes down to this one thing: the state of being that is causing us to interpret life, interpret what we're going through in such a way that is either going to be harmonious or disharmonious. But I want us to know this, that our natural state of being, because we are indeed spiritual beings by nature, our natural state of being is to be whole, to be complete, and to have life flow freely from the inside out. That when it does, when our state of being is oriented to our spiritual nature, the lens that we view life through, our perception is colored by love, peace, joy. When our state of being is rooted in a sense of identity that is egocentric, then the lens that we will view life through is going to be colored by fear, lack, separation, the very opposite. So it's up to us to choose how we are going to orient our minds, which is what's doing the interpreting based on where we stand. So whether life is being experienced beautifully or miserably is not based on the circumstances that's happening in life. Life is actually based on divine law, life is neutral. How we experience it is 100% determined by how we interpret it based on our mindsets, which is rooted in our state of being, which is rooted in our sense of identity. And I hope you got that. Let me put it another way that we might be able to relate to easier. It is said that a tree is known by its fruit. Think about the soil that the tree of our lives is planted in. And this soil is either going to be rich and nourishing, which is our true essence of being, our spiritual identity, or it could be shallow soil that is not as nourishing, which is our ego and identity. Our state of being are the roots that are grounded in this soil. And our state of being draws its nourishment from whichever soil it is rooted in. And as it draws the qualities out of the soil, it is then filtered through as it goes up through the trunk of the tree. It is then filtered through the mindsets and it produces the fruit on the tree. It goes through the branches and it produces these fruits. So whether we experience life based on love, joy, peace, Alexa, stop. Whether we experience the positive things of life or we experience life as a stressful experience is based on this very thing. Now, we need to see from this that we don't experience life as it is. We experience life as we are. Reality, how we perceive reality and how we interpret reality, meaning how life affects us and how we respond to life in every way, has everything to do with our state of being. And our state of being is what determines what is going to shape our mindsets, which is what produces the lens through which we interpret all of it and what our experience will be. So we should look at our lives and see that as we go through our day-to-day experience, as we interact with people, as we deal with life day to day, are we feeling burdened? Are we feeling that life is stressful? Are we feeling that life is tough? Are we on the left side of the tree or the right side of the tree? It's not because of what's happening externally. It's not because of the people and the circumstances. It is how our thoughts about what we see or engage, how we are interpreting that, which is then defining our experience as emotions. Why is this important? Because emotions is that inner energy that will determine the quality of our life physically, relationally, and economically. So the soil is the nature by which we live, either our physical or spiritual nature. The root is our state of being created by our sense of identity, and that pulls from the soil. The trunk of the tree of our life is our mind, which serves as the filter that negotiates, that navigates, that determines how life is going to be experienced. That's why the mind really is the axis of life and how we experience it. The fruit, the emotional response, this is what ripens into our behavior. This is what will determine how we are going to respond, how we are going to approach life, whether we're going to be consistent, determined, procrastinate, committed. Whatever our attitude is going to be towards life is going to be determined this way. So it is not about, I'm having financial problems when I go to get financial counsel. Is that good? That's good. You need to. But if you don't fix this, it is always going to be short-lived for most of the time because we are going to keep defaulting back to our state of mind and our state of being. So in my years in the clinic, I've spent years working with people, helping them to deal with the symptoms that they feel in their bodies. And in my last 5 years, of my 25 years of clinical practice, I started to focus a whole lot more, recognizing that people's, it's not, the issue is not inside their body. I thought it was just their state of mind, but then I realized their state of mind, which is true, is determined by their state of being and which side their life is rooted in. You see, the branches are the different aspects of our lives, whether it is relationships, whether it is finances, whether it is our businesses, whether it is whatever, there are many branches on the tree. And each branch is going to bear fruit. What that fruit is going to look like, what that quality of life is going to be, is going to be determined by our state of being. Health is a complete state of being that encompasses every dimension of our life in harmony. Whether it is going to be in harmony or out of harmony or dissonance depends entirely on what nature our state of being is rooted in. So therefore, we understand clearly that we don't experience life as it is, and we don't get in life what we want. We get in life who we are and what we are. That is how we can create our reality. I'm telling you, this is as true as the sun rises on a morning. So when we're talking about health as a complete state, if we want to truly experience this, we have to gain sovereignty over our well-being in every dimension of our lives. And to gain sovereignty over it is to move beyond, I have a symptom in my body and I'm going to take something, and once the symptom is gone, my body is back in good shape. That's wrong. That's not right. Relief does not equal restoration. So regardless of what dimension of our life it is, we need to be able to work with it on a level that when we restore one area, we're going to restore the others because they're so interconnected that when one area is affected, all the other areas will be, because it's the same state of being from which the same roots that are planted in the same soil that's producing fruit right across the board. So if you look at this, the wholeness of health, if you think about this as a six-spoke wheel, if one spoke in a wheel goes bad, becomes faulty, the entire wheel starts to wobble. And that's how it is with our lives. So when people come to me and we counsel and they talk about things that they're going through with their physical well-being, and we get down and we open that up, I also know that they're having very similar issues across other areas of their lives, and vice versa, regardless of what the dimension may be. So when one area goes out of order, it affects, it ripples through the others. And that's good news. Why? Because as you begin to bring one back in order, it starts to support the others in coming back in order. And so once we understand that, and we understand that our sovereignty, our authority, our rulership over our lives, our dominion that we have over our living. It is rooted in our awakened identity, and how we see ourselves will determine how we value life. And for us not to take life for granted and truly value it, we have to see ourselves at the highest level of life. And that is the inherent nature of our spiritual well being. This is very important because identity is what unlocks potential. Our potential, which is what we are capable of doing, we would never know what we are truly capable of if we don't really know who we are. You see? And that potential, what we're capable of doing, is what gives rise to revealing our purpose. And this is something based on the statistics, eludes many of us, which is why we don't engage life at higher levels. Everybody wants to know purpose. Everybody wants to unlock potential. Everybody wants to live a better life. And we're trying this, we're trying that, we're trying that. And year after year, we make resolutions. We try to live healthier. We try to engage new habits. We try to change our character. And we may get some measure of results, but we keep going in cycles, what I call cycles of fractured living. But it must come back to that place where our identity becomes rooted in self-love. And that is naturally inherent to us when we stand in our true essence of being. But that has to become the framework that cultivates this wholeness. And why that's important? Because as we begin to put the pieces together, every area of our life begins to come back together, not just one. You see, it's impossible to fix one without helping the others, just like it's impossible to break one down without affecting the others. So it's a wonderful pathway for us. And so our mind is the axis on which experience and life is expressed. It's the mind, that's the gateway. But the mind, or mindsets, perceptions built on our beliefs and our whole acculturation, etc., this is what's going to determine the whole process. But when our mental state is one of peace, which comes from that inner state, our brain and our mind functions in harmony, and that enables optimal performance of our cognitive processes and our biological systems. Our mind and body works best when our mind, when our state of mind, determined by our state of being, is in harmony and is rooted correctly. But when our thought patterns and emotional responses are out of sync, it creates an inner disorder, an inner dissonance, a disruption of inner flow of energy. And it puts the mind's operating system, which is the brain, it puts it out of balance, out of order, out of sync. And this inner dissonance is a conflict between us not being clear on who we really are and who we think we are. It's a conflict between how we want to be and how we're trying to be. It creates a state of being that is characterized by what is called stress. And here's the interesting thing. Most of us don't see this as stress because we think that stress are the circumstances. We think stress is the people that are not saying the good things to us or treating us a particular way. We think stress are the bills and the traffic and the health issues that pop up. It is how we are interpreting these things. That's not distress. Stress is really an internal conflict. Psychologists calls it cognitive dissonance, but it's an inner conflict. What's that inner conflict about? It's a conflict between who we truly are, which is our true essence of being, that's striving, naturally flowing to come out, and being stifled against who we've been conditioned to think we are and living by that. That's really what the conflict is. So this identity crisis that leads to this inner distance is what we call stress. And this is how it presents itself. These are some of the ways that we can relate to that conflict, that dissonance, that fractured way, as opposed to being whole. It's a fractured way. And so things like Privately, we would experience life one way, but publicly, we pretend life is another way. And it's projecting self confidence when we go out into the public. But internally, we are very disturbed about what people think about us. So it's a false confidence. It's judging people for their improper behaviors while we try to justify our own. It's proclaiming to value truth, but yet not be honest with ourselves and honest with others. It's recognizing the value of what we call health, but willfully engaging in unhealthy habits. It's a very fractured way of living. It is thinking one way, but saying something else, feeling one way, but doing something else. It is when that inner well being is fractured because it's defined by outer circumstances. So, stress does not arise from external circumstances of life, it comes from how we are interpreting and reacting to them, shaped by our internal framework of mindsets arising from an unstable sense of self. So, our identity is what shapes our beliefs, mindsets, and inner narrative, the very foundation from which we are able to reign in life. But when our identity is rooted in egocentric living, it manifests as conflicting mindsets that inevitably creates this cycle of fractured living. No one is able to live beyond their sense of identity. However we perceive our self-image, our sense of self, who we think ourselves to be, which for many people they're not even conscious of because we don't give a lot of attention to this. But however we consciously or unconsciously perceive our own sense of self and self image, we cannot live higher than that or beyond that. That is the limit to what we are capable of. But I want us to know that what we are actually capable of is so much greater and so much more powerful. So it's really up to us. It's just to flip the script and flip the switch. Stress is the number one driver. This inner conflict is what the root of what stress really is. So you see, and based on all the authorities, this is the number one driver of physical and mental dysfunction. And once this begins, it may start with a lack of energy and it starts to spiral as time goes by. But once our physical and mental well-being starts being affected, everything else starts being affected. And once it starts to show up as sickness and disease, then it doesn't matter what we have in life, nothing else really begins to matter. This is critical. But what we call stress, 60 to 80% of people in modern societies live in a recurring or constant state of stress. Up to 90% of doctor visits are stress related. Stress is the basic cause of 75 to 90% of all human illness. 90% of disease is caused by this internal state. We call it stress, whether it be thoughts or beliefs. Epigenetics and quantum biology is showing these more and more. Chronic stress increases our odds of developing Alzheimer's by 145%, which is beginning to overtake cancer now. And where is it coming from? And what are we doing? We're now treating stress like it is another one of these chronic diseases. So how are we dealing with stress? Well, we do need to have counsel, which is good. But if you don't get to the root, which is our state of being, if we don't get to that, we will be dealing with it just like we deal with diabetes and hypertension and these lifestyle conditions for the rest of our lives, taking something to help to manage it when it can actually be restored completely. How do you know? I've been through it. I lived on medications for a long time for things that they said I would have to live on for the rest of my life. I stopped taking those medications a long time ago. So I'm not just talking from clinical experience or from intellectual knowledge. I've been trying and continuing to learn and walk this way. But my life today is blessed because I've seen how it unfolds. So it's not just intellect and experience, it is actually also personal experience. And how this inner state translates into sickness and disease based on how we orient our minds our minds are is either going to be oriented based on our egocentric self, based on all the data that comes through five senses, or our spiritual well-being and all the data that never gets to come through, but actually naturally flows through, just like our five senses. We just don't know the experience of it because we have not known that side of life. And so, yes, that is a process which is going to become more available, and it's going to become, when we start our workshops, that understanding and that process and the practice of it will help to get us there. But how it translates into sickness and disease is through the central nervous system, which is how we get to experience that inner interpretation that we experience as life. It happens through the central nervous system. And the central nervous system has two branches, which is connected to the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is what controls all of our bodily functions. Everything going on in our bodies, right to the cellular level, is being controlled by the autonomic nervous system. This is what, there are trillions of functions happening right now as we sit here. And we don't know it, we can't feel it, but it's happening. And it's all driven by the central nervous system via the autonomic nervous system, which has two branches. And these two branches are responsive to our two states of being, our two natures, our external and our internal nature, our physical and our spiritual nature. They are responsive to the two of those. The sympathetic system is responsive to stress. So when we are feeling anxious and fearful and frustrated and angry, when negative emotions, what are negative emotions? They don't just come up in a vacuum. They are the expressions of how our perception has interpreted what we think about whatever we see or whatever we're going through. So our mindsets always have, that's why transformation and restoration is always by the renewing of the mind. But the sympathetic nervous system, whenever we're in that stress, that place of stress, this becomes dominant and active. And all the science tells us that chronic stress promotes oxidation and chronic inflammation on all levels, from our brains to our toe. And it just has to keep going on over time consistently, which statistics tell us that most of today's modern population, this is the state we live in. We live in this survival mode, it's called, always in a stress response. This is what brings this cycle down that leads to all kind of chronic illnesses. This system is necessary when there's emergencies that we have to respond to, but then it should settle right back down. And the second branch of it, the parasympathetic system, is what is meant to be dominant. This one is responsive to when there is peace, harmony, love, gratitude, when there is positive energies, positive flows, when what we see, what comes into our experience is being interpreted as being harmonious, because we have a different state of being and a different state of mind, which is now interpreting life in such a way that everything is in balance, everything is harmonious. It doesn't matter who said what, or it doesn't matter what the circumstances are. We are in this place where there's always peace, there's always joy, there's always gratitude. Can that happen? Of course it is. It's actually natural to when we live by our true essence of our spiritual nature. But when this is dominant, when we have that harmony and that balance between our mind and our body, when what's being transacted and interpreted in our minds is creating harmony and balance throughout our system, this is what creates healing and recovery. This is what spontaneous healing is. Spontaneous healing, that phenomenon where people recover from incurable conditions in ways medicine can't understand, is when we have parasympathetic dominance. And that happens when we have that internal homeostatic balance. Here's the interesting thing. The central nervous system is regulated entirely by our state of mind. And our state of mind is measured in brainwave activity. So, what neuroscience has known is that when brainwaves reflect in a harmony and positive frequencies like love, peace, joy, compassion, etc., when the fruit on the tree is positive, the central nervous system remains its natural balance of parasympathetic dominance. But when brain waves begin to reflect inner dissonance, negative frequencies, fear, worry, anxiety, guilt, resentment, etc., the central nervous system shifts into survival mode. And that's where most of us are living. And it's not just affecting our bodies negatively, it's affecting every other area as well. And life becomes an uphill struggle. We're paddling upstream, we're going against the flow. And that's not the way we are designed or intended to live. So the solution is we have to find a way to synchronize our brain waves to match a coherent state of mind, resetting the central nervous system back to its natural state of balance and order. When that happens, not only are we going to have cognitive and physiological balance, but we are going to respond to life completely different. This is a state of who we are and what we believe and how we live are all one and the same. We don't have that fractured way about how we live. It is learning to live by design as opposed to living by default. And it expresses itself when we learn to live this way. It's a process of renewal. And so, yes, it is a process. It is cultivating a truth-centered way of living where life flows from the inside out, from our true essence of being. So this is not just about, this is going beyond, my body doesn't feel well, what do I need to take? That's part of the process, but that's not where we stop. We need to get to the root of why there was even a problem in the first place. Because our bodies are so divine that when spirit, mind, and body are in harmonious balance as one, there is no sickness. And if there is sickness, you will recover from it. And all the science tells us this is how it works. It's just that because we don't go this deep and we don't deal with state of being, although that we define health as a complete state of being, because we don't work for that completeness or that wholeness, we're always taking fractured approaches that serves us temporarily, but never gets us to, and so we improve here, we improve there, we improve there, then we cycle back around again. But what if we can synchronize our brain waves to match a coherent state of mind without having to go through the whole process of renewal and transformation and renewing our mindsets? We need to and we should go through the practice because it's a beautiful and wonderful journey of life that is very enriching to do that. But it takes time and it takes diligence and it takes practice. But what if there was a way that we can all synchronize our brain waves? That the central nervous system would regulate itself because the brain waves are all coherent with a state of mind that is harmonious and balanced. And that is what this pattern that I talked about earlier is about. It's a simple pattern that is reshaping the future of mind body wellness. This pattern was discovered by this gentleman. His name is Jay Dhaliwal. He's the founder of a company called the Super Patch Company. He is a software engineer by trade, and he discovered it because he was trying to find a solution for his mother's multiple sclerosis. And after 15 years of neuroscientific research and development, over time, he discovered something so profoundly powerful, yet so simple that it could actually go over our heads. And it has been now become bona fide science now that, and it's beginning to change the world. In fact, that's his vision now, is to build something out of this that's going to be generational, that will transform the world, because it's bringing in and ushering in a new paradigm of drug-free wellness. This is a technology that he has developed that has no medicines, no ingredients, no external frequencies, no devices to stimulate anything. It actually puts nothing into the body. But what it does is it taps in to that inner well-being, that inner intelligence that built, designed, and runs our system. It taps into that in a way that is so natural that it is the most natural and cleanest thing that I've come across in my years in the health and wellness industry. I'm going to show you 2-minute video where he demonstrates it using an EEG brain scan to demonstrate its efficacy. And then I'm going to just explain that, and then we'll come down to a close.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jay Dallywell. I'm the CEO and founder of Vox Life and the creator of Vox Life HPT. Today, I want to talk to you about a Harmony Neuro Patch. And what this product does is actually stimulates receptors on our skin, sending a neurosignal to our brain to help it reach homeostasis. This is the only product in the world that relies on the neurohaptic system that every single one of us has to optimize our neurology and optimize our health. Today, with the help of Dr. Mark DeBrinket, our VP of Clinical Strategy, we're going to be using an FDA-cleared 19-channel EEG headset, as well as FDA-cleared software to visualize, record, and show the impact that our technology has on our neurology and our brains to help it reach optimal performance. What we want to show today is how the Harmony Neuro Patch helps that dysregulated yellow, blue, and red colors in the brain maps transform into that healthy green homeostasis neurology that is the foundation of health and wellness. So what we're looking at right now is a neurological QEEG output of Mike's limbic system. The 19 channels are reading over 60,000 brainwaves a second and generating an output of neurofunction and brainwaves. What we want to see now is where that suboptimal red and yellow colors are. We want to see them turning as much as possible to a healthy green with the application of our HPT patch. So we've applied the patch now to Mike's arm, and within 10 seconds, you're seeing that predominant yellow and red become predominantly green. Just for clarification, ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing in the world that has this output at this rate of speed without drugs, without chemicals, without electricity. That's the power of Vox HPT. So when we see a healthy green neurology, what we're looking at is a brain and a mind in homeostasis. It is operating in its optimal function. And this is so important. And this is why it's so important. So Vox Life HPT, as we demonstrated with our neuro patch, helps the central nervous system reach homeostasis in our neurology. And the reason this is so important for overall wellness and health is that neurology is the top of the pyramid of our physiological health and wellness paradigm. First is neurology at the very top, then there's chemistry, then there's biology, then there's physics and mechanics. Neurology will have an impact all the way through our entire physiology. Healthy neurology, healthy body, better wellness.
The technology is really based on Nobel Prize research that goes way back into the 1930s and 40s, where it was first discovered that every cell in the human body receives and transmits electromagnetic frequencies. Everything in nature is that way, actually. But they've discovered that, and it led to what we know today as MRIs, MEGs, EEGs, and how we're able to map things in the body, because every cell in the human body receives and transmits vibrational frequencies. And then later on in the early 2000s, two other Nobel Prize laureates discovered that there are what they call ion channels that's embedded in sensory neurons in the skin. And these sensory neurons can actually detect the vibration of anything that touches the skin. And what Superpatch has been able to discover is how they can create patterns that will give specific vibrational frequencies through the skin to the brain to bring our brain waves of various areas of the brain back into balance, thereby optimizing normal function between brain and body which optimizes cognitive and physiological function. A simple way to understand it is how a QR code would work. We would look at this QR code. This is a QR code of my website. You can't tell that, but if you point your camera at it, it's going to convert the visual pattern you see there into a digital signal and unlock the information, and now you have the data. In a very similar way, Superpatch has discovered that they can create patterns, tactile patterns, that when that pattern touches the skin, it sends a vibrational signature to the brain that brings specific areas of the brain back into its natural and original balance. So, for example, if we have a weak immune system, it is because that part of the brain that governs optimal immune function, the brain waves activity is not in their optimal harmonious balance. Before any organ or system becomes dysfunctional or impaired in any way, it must first happen in the control center of the brain. We notice in neurology, but our practice in medicine, we don't deal with it from that level. So Super Patch, for example, they have a patch, it's called Defend, and the Defend patch, the pattern on it sends a gentle signal to the brain and brings the network of the brain that governs immune function into its original optimal balance. The result is immune system goes to its optimal function, and it happens almost immediately. And so they are very, very effective in the way they work. So after 15 years of research and development, what is called vibrotactile technology has become peer-reviewed and published research, and is now published in many prestigious medical and international journals regarding health and wellness. Additionally, the technology has been presented and is being presented at major global medical research symposiums, and their peer review boards and authorities are also validating the science of it. This is amazing technology that is so simple, and it's the reason why it's attracting attention is because it is actually creating enhanced physical and mental function by just restoring natural harmony and balance between mind and body without introducing anything into the system. Just by sending a signal, the skin reading the pattern, sending a signal to the brain, restoring brainwave balance, optimizing the synergy between mind and body, and we get that function. Superpatch to date has discovered and produced 14 different technologies, which are 14 different patterns that when they touch the skin, they optimize performance in these areas. The one that you saw Jay demonstrated was the Liberty Patch, which is if you have problems with balance, stability, mobility, this is anti-aging, it reduces inflammation, and these are all scientifically researched and developed. They're all FDA registered. Whether it is you're dealing with pain, you want to improve your athletic performance, your stamina, your endurance, your power. If you're dealing with anxiety, stress, and associated issues, enhanced immune function, increase the body's ability to heal and repair. You're dealing with issues with sleep, mental clarity, cognition, and how your brain is processing information, energy, moods, enhancements. You're feeling low, you're feeling depressed, focus and concentration, healthy skin, improved metabolism, habit control, masculine function. These are what the company has developed so far. And what they have in research and development right now, I can tell you, is way ahead of the game of where regenerative and regular medicine is today. This company is pioneering a new frontier, and they are introducing a new era and a new approach, improving physical and mental well-being in a way that has never been done before. I gravitated towards this and I really like it. Why? Because I know that it's already inherently built in to the divine design of the human makeup to heal and repair on every level, provided everything is in order and in balance. That order and balance, while it requires proper nutrition and proper lifestyle habits, at the very core of it is our state of being, which influences our state of mind, which is what governs how everything plays out. And so, if you can work at that level, now you're getting to the core of the problem. Now you're looking at transformation. Now you're looking at restoration. Now you're going beyond symptom control. And so, we have a mind body solution that really the entire world really needs this. And that's why I've become passionate about sharing this also with the world, because to enhance physical and mental well being in a way that's completely safe and non invasive, and there's no contraindications, it doesn't matter what medication you're on, if you have any medically implanted devices, none of those things matter. If you have a child that is 2 years old, 3 years old, and the child has developed a little flu, you can put it onto the child. Absolutely safe, and you'll see how quick and effective they work. And so this is something that the entire world needs to know about. When you begin to combine them and synchronize them together, now you're talking about a level of efficacy and entrainment of the brain and body in ways that there is no supplement, there is no medicine up there that can actually tap into what we're this is tapping into. This is this is something that is brand new into the wellness industry. And so you're talking about unlocking the potential that is within us, our original design, and bringing it back into harmony. So just to recap and to conclude, these are safe, wearable, non-invasive, touch-based technology that's designed to optimize brainwave entrainment. Why that is so important is because it supports neuroplasticity, which is how the brain rewires itself to this new balance that the patches are delivering. And over time, through consistent use over time, as the brain rewires itself, now you're getting into a different level of change, of sustainability. So the skin delivers this specific neurosignal to gently guide the brain toward a healthier state. The signals sync with the innate intelligence of the body's operating system, and it enhances that balance between mind and body. You can't get better than that. What I suggest to people, and this is where you get to see really how transformative it is when you begin to get the experience of this, and then you add to that entrainment by engaging in practices of shifting thought patterns and mindsets, which actually becomes easier when you use them. That is where you begin to see more change. You see, the signaling creates the optimal environment for rapid neurological alignment, making mindset shifts more natural and more accessible, whereas before they're harder to access because our minds are too restless and too disorderly in their function. So super patches work like updating the body's operating system, just like you want to load new and specific apps onto your phone or your computer. If you update the operating system, these new apps will work better. So in a very similar way, you want to look at getting into the process of transformation and renewing your mind and looking at living at a higher level. These patches come like updating the mind's operating system, which is the brain, to function more coherently so that there's more, the whole process is more accessible. Very easy to use. Anybody could wear them. They pretty much go anywhere on your body. Each patch lasts for 24 hours, and they're all safe and they're all clinically tested. Super Patch has a medical advisory board that supports the real world application and testing of it. And so, from all angles, this technology is scientifically supported and validated. So, my invitation to you is to join the movement of which myself and perhaps others who might have invited you on the call are a part of, because this is something that the world needs. But I want to encourage you, while it's going to help our bodies to feel better and our emotional and mental resilience to improve, that we should go beyond that and look at bringing alignment, get our lives properly aligned. And it's easy to do that because you just become a member of the company, and it's only $40. And that's a one-time $40 to become a member of the company, where it makes accessing the technology far more affordable. So if the mind is our battlefield and the mind is the access of our experience of life, Super Patch is our strategic advantage to being able to live our best life. And so as you become a member, it becomes really way more accessible, and you have a lot more options that you can consider. So as a member, you can now choose what in our team, we call it our Flex 4 Starter Pack. That $175 includes that one-time $40 membership. And you get to choose 4 of any of the technologies to start engaging with your life. I have those 3 in case people are not sure what to use. These 3 are perhaps the most fundamental foundational patches that taps in to that mind-body synergy and enhances all biological systems. This here really changes your whole state of well-being. Plus you add another one to that. But as a member now, you now also have the option to participate as a Super Patch entrepreneur into the globally scalable economic model. And this is a business that you can develop. For those who might be interested in that, we have a session that we do. It's actually tomorrow at 6:30, where we talk about the economic model, how that works, and how you can be able to build a globally scalable business where you have full control over how that's happened. We explain that tomorrow. It's more of an interactive session. If you scan the QR code on the screen, that will take you to the Zoom link for that, or you can just speak to the person that would have invited you onto the call, and they will be able to share the link with you. That's tomorrow evening at 6:30. And so I want to say thank you to each and everyone for taking the time to come on the call this evening. It really is part of my passion, human well-being, and seeing people's lives impacted and change for the better. What I shared with you this evening, it encompassed both a little bit of my work with sovereign well-being and the approach to that, and which I've incorporated the Super Patch technology, which there's nothing else like it that has this type of impact, on human well-being. And so I invite you to reach out to the person who might have shared the invitation with you to be here, get more information. If you have an interest, join us on the call. Becoming a member of the company is very easy, very simple, and being able to change your life in multiple ways on multiple levels is very accessible with this, and particularly with the way how we are building our teams. And so with that, I want to thank each and every one of you again for coming on this evening and joining us and giving us this opportunity. So we look forward until next time. God bless you. Have a good night. And remember where we started, it really is up to you. If you can change it, if it was up to you, but it is up to you and up to me. And we have it in our hands. God bless you. Have a wonderful week. Have a good night. And perhaps we'll see you tomorrow evening.